So when asked why Sam and I moved to Sweden, there are too many conflicting things that oversimplify the answer. There are many, many aspects of it that I don't go into regularly. But if you are curious and that you want to know why we moved to Sweden, 7 years later, when everything's a lot more clear, it's a combination of things. So let's start with me because I was the primary impetus for us moving. I was a man in his 30s who had lived in Texas my entire life. I had spent at most a month or two elsewhere in my entire life. Texas is a big place. It's bigger than Sweden, but it's still a singular place with a mostly singular culture. There are other individual cultures like, poor Texas culture, poor white Texas culture, poor black Texas culture, Hispanic culture, all of those things because Texas is huge. But it's still just one place, and Texas is not the United States. And the United States is not Texas. And I had a lot of trouble differentiating the two when I first moved over here. But I had never really been anywhere else. And so while I knew very well how people in Texas worked and how the culture in Texas worked, I did not understand anything about the rest of the US, much less the rest of the world. So I had just gotten my first master's degree. I was on hiatus from my school for telling a dirty joke. And I was still getting paid, but I was sitting at home very, very bored. And so when I got an email that said, come to an international job fair, have you ever thought about teaching abroad? And I was like, I have never thought about teaching abroad, but I got nothing else going on. So I went to an international job fair. And I met a lot of people. They were very excited about the fact that I was a math teacher, in addition to being an English teacher. And pretty much immediately after that job fair, I got job offers in 5 different countries. Job offers in Hong Kong, Dubai, India, the UK, and Sweden. And this was during the time of kind of about the time of the Arab Spring. So I was a little worried about Dubai and I was a little worried about India because my wife is large and loud and I like her to be able to be that way. And I was worried if we went to those places, she would feel some societal pressure, even if it was not explicit, to be different than who she is. And that is unfair. I read something online that said that Hong Kong students are not allowed to argue with their teachers. They're expected to be very respectful and deferential. And I don't want to teach kids who can't argue. The UK had the opposite problem, which was that students, after a certain point, are given up on in the UK. They have kind of a 3-strike system where if a student is bad and gets kicked out of 3 schools, they just stop trying to educate them. They just stop trying. And I never want to work in a place like that. So Sweden was what was left. Sweden was good in a lot of ways. I grew up in a lesbian household. And when in the 80s, when I was growing up, Sweden was famous for gay rights because they called in gay when gay was classified as a sickness. And I can go off, all of these things can go off and have individual stories. If you have comments, I will be happy to answer them. Feel free to do that. And I can explain additional stuff. But Sweden had always stuck in my mind as kind of a paradise where women and men were treated equally. The pay gap was significantly smaller. Boys and girls played sports together. That's not something I ever experienced in the U.S. But it's also, Sam and I came from poverty. We had not traveled really at all, except for occasional school trips. And for me, twice for crime and once for my family going to the Smithsonian for a month. So I did not have experiences of the rest of the world. And it felt like I never would. So having a chance to live somewhere else, even if it was just for a couple of years, was magical. I don't know that I ever planned to stay in Sweden. I'm not sure that ever came up in my mind. But once we were here, we were like, oh, we need to stay. At the same time, the U.S. was going in a considerably worse direction. We had just elected Donald Trump, and he had not taken over yet, but we were like, this is not looking good. And a lot of the people around us were becoming worse people. And a lot of our friends were changing, growing, becoming different. And it was a way for us to just kind of do something. And for both Sam and I, who had been treading water for a significant amount of time, don't get me wrong, we loved being teachers. But we did not know what our future was going to be. Being teachers was not getting us out of debt. Being teachers was not significantly helping our students. We weren't making a dent in the way that Texas treats their kids. No matter how much we were trying, we weren't significantly helping people. And we felt bad about that. Sweden had a recent influx of immigrants. They desperately needed teachers. They're still short on teachers. And that's how I've been able to stay employed. Sam just stayed at the safe place, which was very smart. But it felt like a chance to do some good. It felt like a chance to be the change we wanted to see in the world. And Texas felt less and less welcoming. We felt like we were doing less and less good. We were still in a dramatic amount of debt that wasn't going to change. And moving to Sweden felt like a fresh start. Our families mostly supported us. I don't think they thought it was permanent at the time. But there were significant global factors in our decision. But the truth is that we really just wanted to try something new. And I am terrified of new things. Since I had this channel, I have found out that I'm autistic. Many of you will be like, well, duh. But for me, I did not know why I was losing jobs constantly in the US and in Sweden. And it's because socially I have problems. It's very rarely a competence at the job issue. It's almost always, yeah, he weirded me out about this one thing, and then he didn't apologize for it. And I was like, I didn't know it was wrong. So, yeah, we just want it. Whenever I'm afraid of something, I have to do it. It's how it works and how my brain works. So I was terrified of moving somewhere else. So of course we had to do it. So I talked to Sam because it's her life too. And we talked about it and we talked about it and we talked about it. And then we tried to get her a job. And when we both had jobs in Sweden, we were like, holy shit, I guess we're doing this. And we kind of tried to close up everything we could, pack up. I gave away a ridiculous amount of stuff from my house in Bluebonnet. Had a bunch of people just come over and take from my library. And that was the fucking hardest thing about moving, honestly, was letting people take from my library without like any expectation of ever seeing those books again. And there's a lot of things that were worth a lot of money that I am certain have been sold for pennies. I am certain. You know, I had several toys that were vintage. I had Warhammer figurines. Those things can sell for ridiculous amounts of money. And my friend Travis did fantastic art painting on them. And I could have sold those things for thousands of dollars. And I'm pretty sure my sister just sold like the lot of them for 50. But, you know, como se dice? No, that's not the right thing. Que sera, sera. Sorry. whew, I'm going to get burned for that. Anyway, but yeah, it was mostly just wanting to make a difference, but also wanting to experience something new. The UK, we would have still been speaking English. And yeah, we would have been confused and we would have had to change culture a little bit. But Sweden, we have to learn. We have to grow. And Sweden is famous for taking care of its workers. And Sweden is famous for taking care of its people. And Sweden's going through some crises right now. And it's useful for us to be here. And now that we're citizens, I'm probably going to have to get involved in at least local politics, because a lot of native Swedes don't give a fuck about immigrants. They invited them in, but they're not going to support them, which is just setting people up to fail. And that's bullshit. So I do the best that I can here, but we are here to stay. We have Swedish citizenship. We have EU citizenship at this point. We're not going anywhere. It is possible we'll move north a little bit. Maybe go to Gothenburg. It's possible we'll move to Malmo. We need to be in a place that's diverse for us to be useful. I am working on my Swedish. I hope to stay here forever, but I need legitimation, which hopefully will come soon. Anyway, overall, I am good. But the reason that we moved to Sweden was a combination of factors, both global, national, local, and the fact that just I was scared. I was scared to do it, and that meant I had to do it. That's how my brain works. So that's why we're in Sweden. Sam is game. That is a defining adjective about her, and part of why we are such a fantastic couple. Is that if I really want to do something, Sam's going to roll up her sleeves and she's going to do it. And I like to think I'm the same when she has some dramatic project going, as long as it's not genuinely unreasonable. But for the most part, like, we're both game. We're both good to go. And if the other person really wants to do something and is then we do it. So that's why we moved to Sweden. There were a lot of people who have come up with really bizarre things about us moving to Sweden. But no, it's just we hadn't had anything else. We were both poor. We never traveled. This was a chance. This was an excuse. And now that we've been here, we have traveled more significantly than we have in our lives. And yet, there's still so many close places we've never been to. We have now, at this point, we were in Denmark before we were in Sweden. We came in on Copenhagen Airport, and we stayed in Denmark for a week before we came over to Sweden. But we have since been to Norway for a day, been to the UK for a week. We have not been to Germany yet. We have not been to France. We have not been to Spain. We have not been to Italy. There's all these places that are very close. We haven't been to Belgium. We haven't been to the Netherlands. Any of those places. There's all these places very close we haven't been to yet. And we hope to at some point. But we're not there yet. So that's why we moved to Sweden. And this is my first video back. So welcome back to my channel. Hope you are well.